amazing Women Speak podcast, inspiring and motivating every Black woman to own, honor, and execute her amazing, individually and collectively, as it was established at birth.
I'm Crystal L. Gunn, founder of the Amazing Woman Network and host of Amazing Women Speak. And thank you in advance for sharing this with your friends and family so you can all join in on this conversation, which I guarantee you will be dynamic and informative. So March was Women's History Month, and we celebrated some dynamic women who were doing or are doing some incredible work in their space. And the topic was my seat at the table. Well, our guest tonight could not be a part of that celebration, but we found it fitting to bring her on this month to hear how she has created her own table, as well as lift up some information because April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and she's an expert in this field and is doing incredible work around healing and so much more. But before we bring her on, Michele, thank you, my dear, for saying yes to Amazing Women Speak, which would not be as dynamic and powerful as it is without you. So I'm honored to do this work with you. And so this hour today is going to seem shorter than ever. You always say it's the shortest hour of your day, but I can't wait. And this episode has been a long time coming. So Michele, let's get right to it.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Michele Harper. Excited to have the privilege and the opportunity to one more time sit side by side with my BFF and have some necessary and amazing conversations where we pay attention to the gifts that Black women bring to this space, and we pay attention to the many ways in which they are amazing. I've never been more excited to have such a challenging conversation than I am tonight. This is a conversation every Black woman, every woman, but specifically Black women, need to pay attention to. It is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. The woman that we have joining us tonight has owned this space in a way that has invited us to think about the ways in which we pay attention and to the things that have been unsaid. Many of you may know her in other spaces. She is gifted with what she will do with her hands inside of your head, and she is gifted with what your heart will do in the lives of women that she comes in contact with. This is the fastest hour of your day. This is going to be one for the record books. Ladies, text your girlfriends right now and tell them to tune in. This is a conversation not to be missed. Whether you are a victim, whether you are a survivor, whether you are a friend, you need to be a part of this conversation. Facebook, we invite you, as we do each week, drop your questions, your comments. We would love to have you a part of this conversation that is necessary and long overdue. So let's get it started. Kalimah, please introduce yourself to the folks.
I will, and let me just say good evening to both of you, and I'm just so honored to be here with you all today. And what really makes me so happy is y'all BFFs doing this work together. Y'all know each other in the work, and I just love that you all are doing this, and this is so important. My name is Kalimah Johnson. I am the executive director, the founder, and a participant at the SASHA Center here in Detroit. SASHA stands for Sexual Assault Services for Holistic Healing and Awareness, and we focus on and we center the voices and the healing practices of Black women and girls, which also, when you're healing and working in healing space with Black women and girls, that also heals our families, our partners, our children, and our community as a whole. So that is one of the things I do. And this is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. It's the last day. And every day we've had something to do and something to say about sexual assault. I couldn't be more prouder and happier to be on the last day of April with two sisters talking about this work that we're doing here in Detroit and abroad. So that's one thing. You did also mention it, Michele, and I might as well put it here as well, as I am a natural hair care stylist as well. That is something that brings me joy, and I love to do natural hair. I wish I could do it all the time, but I do it on a part-time basis, and I love doing that. That's where I can work and be creative in my own spaces, and I love that. And then I'm also the lead consultant on relationship safety and management with the National Basketball Association, and I do consulting work for the National Football League, the National Hockey League, and sometimes the National Hockey League, and sometimes I work with MLB when they acting right. So my job, I see my job and my role as a consultant, especially with the NBA, because I really spend a lot of time with them and I enjoy doing it, is to make sure that players transition into, participate, and get out the game whole with their family, friends, relationships, romantic or otherwise, intact, so that they can concentrate on the game and make the best of it in their careers and afterwards. So that is another thing that I do. And then I am also finishing up, as of yesterday, my second master's degree in English literature. My first master's degree is in social work. And I am finishing up my first year as a PhD student in the same program. So I'm working towards getting my PhD in English literature. And what I'm really specifically studying is the way in which Black women share their stories of trauma using humor, irony, and satire. So I'm really excited about that work, and I'm digging very deeply into the works of Black women writers who have provided us with a blueprint about healing from all kinds of trauma, but in particular sexual assault. It's been there, we just don't know it. It is my job to dig it up and bring it back out.
All right, so when is part 2? Because there's no way that we're going to be able to unpack the dynamic ways in which this woman is contributing to this world.
Yes.
One session. So very grateful, Kalimah, so very humble to share this space with you tonight. It really is going to be the fastest hour of the day. So we need to launch deep and launch quick, because so many layers to the gift that you bring to this world. And so we have to start with the basic to be able to begin to dig to the level that we want. Please describe to us the difference between sexual assault and domestic violence.
Well, that's an interesting way of framing the question. And I like to answer it like this, and I just talked about this yesterday. If you all don't know, please look up UGMA organization. They are a national organization that does research on Black women and girls. And we just had a conversation yesterday about domestic violence and sexual assault collectively. What happens is they're both the same in that power and control is the bottom line dynamic. Domestic violence happens usually when they're referring to domestic violence, they're talking about violence that occurs within relationships with people that you live with your family members and friends and things like that, to somebody you're dating or in a relationship with. Sexual assault can happen across the board. It can be a stranger, it can be a family member, it could be anybody. The difference between the two is that domestic violence tends to be part, I should say, framed more in talking about violence against women as it relates to physical abuse. Sexual assault is sexual assault and sexual abuse, which is of a sexual nature. One of the things I want to say is that they're married for sure, because if you are in a domestic violence relationship and you don't have any power control, and that you also probably likely don't have the option of saying no, and that your consent is not honored or recognized. And so we find that a lot of people who are in domestic violence relationships who experience these things also experience sexual assault. And so while we don't try to make a demarcation or a difference between the two, I would say that, in terms of doing the work, the difference is there's way more funding out there and programming for domestic violence than there is for sexual assault. But we're changing that, and we're changing it slowly. And I'm glad to say that I'm a part of that movement and change to make sure that the federal government and the other funding institutions and organizations and foundations find a way to support sexual assault in a more intentional and deliberate way. Now, as a whole, when folks are looking at domestic violence, it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month actually is in October. They are able to say, well, it's a relationship, it's a romantic relationship or a dating relationship where people have children in common and there is violence occurring. But in sexual assault, it can happen in any context or any relationship in any space with anybody if your consent is not honored and if you have experienced some kind of sexual activity that you did not agree to. So that's for sure.
So yeah, and I don't know how we find the time tonight to get into the part of this as Black women in the ways in which we've been socialized, where our no has to come with a comma versus a period, right? Yeah. So I'm hoping that we can work that into the conversation, because we give yeses in places where no is the right response, right?
Yes.
And so I'm hoping that we get a chance to dig into that, but I want to back up and talk about how you came to this work. I want to put a pin in that, but I want to talk a little bit about how you came to this work.
Absolutely. And I like to hold on to that word no, because I'd like to also drop this like resource before I move on about that, because I'm glad you talked about that. There is a documentary that was created by Aisha Shahida Simmons called No. And it talks about the extent to which no is a part or not a part of our lexicon and our language, and how we, have been, like, I would say, socialized as Black women not to say no.
100%.
And so, right. And so I think it's extremely important to talk about that. So let's get back to the question of how I got into the work. So I also identify as a participant in the groups at my own nonprofit on purpose. And I also want to say, in terms of language, I don't refer to sexual assault people who have had sexual assault committed against them as survivors, nor do I call them victims. I call them experiencers, because a lot of times what Black women have taught us is that I'm not a victim. Don't call me that. And I'm not a survivor either, because that's not where I am today. And what we found is that the term experiencer, which is a term that I'm working on with my PhD right now to get other people to start thinking about it in that way, is that if you just say this person experienced sexual assault, it gives them the opportunity to name themselves for themselves. And that might change from day to day. So one day they might say, yeah, I feel like a thriver today. Some days they might say, I feel like a survivor. I feel like a warrior. I feel like I don't know what I feel like. I don't know what I am today. Or I am definitely a victim and I need you to see me as that, especially when they're advocating for themselves in different systems. So to turn this back into me, it's easy for me to really share that I am a survivor and experiencer of sexual trauma. The sexual trauma that I experienced started when I was very young. I was 4, maybe 5 years old when I was first being sexually abused by a family member. And then I was sexually assaulted again when I was 15 on a first date with someone. And then I was sexually assaulted again at 19 by a so-called boyfriend. And so what happened was, you don't just get sexually assaulted and get better right away. I had to go through some things. And when we all experience trauma, we have to go through some things. And one of the things that I learned was that I used anger as a way to try to cope. And I was not happy. And I was running around being a mean girl. And that I thought would make me feel stronger. And that wasn't the case. And what happened was, by the time I got to college and I decided that I was gonna, first of all, my major was English, but my mama said I wasn't gonna get no job in English. She even made me go look in the paper. It's gonna make me go look in the paper talking about find a job for English majors. Just find one. I said, Mama, it wouldn't be no paper if it wasn't for English majors. She said, you get your smart ass in there and get this paper and show me where they hiring. And they were not. And my mother worked at the state, and she was an assistant payment worker. And she said, you should become a social worker. You like it when you come over here in the summertime. It's your thing. And I said, okay. So I majored in social work, and that's how I got here. But when I did that, we had to do internships. And I said, okay, what two populations scared the bejesus out of me? I said, children and rape victims. So my first internship was with children at an elementary school. And part of the assignment that we had, thank God for the supervisor, she made us go pull our own children's records and look at our own records to see how we move through the system. I went and pulled my records, and they were a hot mess. And then I put timing together, because I was in different schools at different points, and I put timing together. And the minute I started failing in school was probably at the same time when I was really being sexually assaulted by a family member. And so I said, I'm not really afraid of children. I'm afraid of my own childhood past. Because kids love me. I love kids. Kids love me. I be like, shoot, gone, kid. But they be like, we got you. And so I learned from that. And then my second internship was at the Rape Counseling Center. And then when I was there, thank God for those Black women who held on to me, and white women too, but particularly the Black women I worked with every day, said, you can't help somebody else until you process what you've been through. And you can't use what you've been through to help somebody else. You got to be able to strike that balance. And so I was able to learn how to do that, and learned it from some really amazing Black women here in Detroit. The Rape Counseling Center was founded in 1975 as a result of the schoolgirl rapes in Detroit. It was a rash of them happening then, and that's when they started the program. And that program is housed within the Detroit Police Department. And so I did my internship, and I applied for a job. All it required was a bachelor's degree. And they said, well, we don't want to hire you part-time. This is just a year job. We want you to use this year, go back and get your master's, and we'll hire you when you're done. And that's what they did. And I was with them for 10 years total from the time I started my internship until I left. And what I learned in that system was that we had well-meaning people that really wanted to help rape survivors, no matter what their race or color was. But we were working within a system. And within that system, there were people, human beings, who just did not show up well enough for Black women. And I started paying attention to it, so much so that I had to ask my supervisor, I said, is it just me? Or am I just seeing things, or I'm just hearing things? And my mother, she raised us to be African-centered. My mother was very into the Black culture. I know a lot about Black people stuff just because my mother, I was at my Black graduation yesterday at Wayne State, beating the man to it, doing the libations. I'm like, you taking too long. This don't take that long to do a libation ceremony. I know how to do it. It was beautiful. Don't get me wrong. But I was being all critiquing because this is how I grew up. So I was very sensitive to how Black women were being treated because I'm a Black woman and these other Black women were showing me how to do the work. And some things just came up, and the things that came up, and I stick to this all the time, there was always a sense of urgency when I was carrying that pager for when rape victims were brought into this hospital system. And usually back then, when a rape would happen in Detroit, everybody got taken to Detroit receiving. And so if I was working that shift and I had that pager, they would page. And if I called the person back, it really depended, and I really mean this, how much power that person had that was calling me in the position that they were in to let me know that somebody was there. And it would inform me of who I was about to interface with. If it was the doctor, if it was the physician's assistant, if it was the head nurse, hurry up and get down here. Stop what you're doing. I don't care what you're doing. And the family in the lobby, make sure you see them before you go. It was a white woman, and it didn't matter what kind of white woman. We're talking about economic status, right? Or it was a Black woman who was politically or religiously connected to a powerful man in the city of Detroit. Everybody else was, oh, finish your lunch and get down here. They'll be here.
Right.
You know, matter. Just when you can, and she gonna be here, or just get here. And I'm like, what is this attitude about, and why? And it's not just an attitude. Let's talk about the damage, right? I looked at a rape kit that had been collected, and it said her fingernails were dirty. And I asked the nurse, did it occur to you that that might be skin up under there, and that you need to take the swab and get that skin out of there because there might be some DNA in there? I ain't a nurse. So they looking at me like, you the social worker, you a guest in this house, you don't get to ask me about why I didn't.
Right.
But I'm saying, before you start saying all these things, or having investigators say, I'm not taking the pictures of her bruises because she's too dark. Or having written in a police report, this heifer lying. Yes, we saw that. And then let's talk about the real insult, which made me start the SASHA Center in the first place. I left that job, had been gone probably 7 years, and it came out that 11,000 of those rape kits that I saw them collect were not being tested.
Right.
So it wasn't just an insult on the Black, 81% of those rape kits were Black women. So what kind of messaging do you think a system that's supposed to protect us is sending to us when they let rape kits sit in a building? Not just any building, that building was being torn down. So they moved the rape kits, all 11,000+ of them, and put them in a building that was being torn down. It wasn't just a building that was sitting there. It was in the process of being torn down to destroy DNA that they never tested.
Yeah, racism is alive and well and thriving in
it's
this.
Anti-Blackness.
Absolutely, right?
They call it what it is.
And so, right, like Black women continue to be the most unprotected in this country, right?
And we're expected to get it ourselves. We're not expected to ask for any help.
Right, and so we lift up often, and unfortunately on this show, that the system is doing what it was designed to do because it was not designed for us, right? And so I don't expect, and it's unfortunate and numbing that I'm not surprised that 11,000 kits were placed in a building that was scheduled to be destroyed, right? Like I'm not, because we continue to be the most unprotected in this country. I need to back up because we need to give language for folks, right? Sure. And so I'm going to ask you to educate us on the nuances. If there are any differences, are there any nuances we need to pay attention to? Because women need to be able to name it. They need to be able to have voice when they go and ask for help. The difference, Kalimah, between date rape, sexual assault. Help us unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I think usually people ask the difference between rape and sexual assault. They're really the same.
Okay.
Criminal sexual conduct is the language that they use here in Michigan to describe the laws that are being broken. So it's a CSC 1, 2, 3, or 4. So usually CSC 1 and 3 is with penetration, 2 and 4 is without. But typically, when we're talking about rape and sexual assault, we will use the term sexual assault. Rape or sexual assault doesn't mean that there was more violence or less. They really just are interchangeable terms. But usually when we're talking about sexual assault, that is us using the language when we're writing proposals or grants, or just using that language because we want to cover it all. Like, so when you talk about being more specific about what kinds of sexual assaults happen, usually that's when the word rape comes up: date rape, stranger rape, marital rape, rape under the lack of consent. Like, that's when the word tends to be used, but it's really all the same. And let me define sexual assault and rape for everybody. It is the absence of consent. If the person and you experiencing some kind of sexual activity that you did not consent to, meaning you did not say yes to, meaning you didn't make it clear that this is what you want to do. And sexual assault rape can happen because under the age of 16, you cannot give consent. And if you're 16, you can only give consent to people who are under the age of 21, because 21-year-olds can buy alcohol. And then also, speaking of alcohol, you cannot consent to sex of any kind if you are under the influence of drugs or alcohol. And you cannot provide consent even under the even if you're in distress or you have a mental health issue or if you are disabled. You cannot. Regardless of age. Regardless of age.
Okay.
If you are under the influence of alcohol or drugs, you are not, it's like, consent is like, it's a wash. And so I'll give you an example. And I talk to guys about this all the time. If you wouldn't give her keys to your car to drive under that, then don't put your penis or nothing else inside of her. It's just really that simple. We ain't got to make it complicated. You know, and I just love how you said, let's just go deep into this, because at the end of the day, I will tell you this as well. When we first started our groups at the SASHA Center, we just knew we was the bomb. We're going to focus on Black women. We're going to give Black women a space. We're going to make it like us. And I say this even to this day, how Black people do it. What Black women saying? How do Black women feel? I love this proposal you just gave me about making sure that we have sexual health all talked about in this group and all these sessions, but we're making this Black. How you make this Black? They like, well, we know how to make it Black, but no one has ever asked us to make it Black. Y'all Black, make it Black. And they came back with the blackity black, and I was very happy. I said, this is how you do it. And when they came back with the blackity black, they gave us statistics about Black women and sexual health. They gave us books to read about Black women and sexual identity. They gave us all kinds of things related to just the historical trauma of how OBGYN medicine started. I mean, they gave us the stuff. Maternal health issues that Black women have. They came with, and I was like, yes, that's what I'm talking about. That's what we want. That's what we need. But one of the things when we first started our groups, and we started them, and we had a couple of, before we started our groups, we actually had some, what do you call them? Like protest kinds of actions. We started Muting R. Kelly way before Mute R. Kelly. I know we'll talk about that later, but we were out there marching in the like, to early 2000s when he was performing. Not at LCA wasn't even built yet, and we were there saying, we need you to go home because you've been doing some stuff. And we got laughed at by everybody. It was a really interesting experience. But so we decided to have these groups, and we had them at Mary Grove College, because at that time I was a tenure track professor teaching social work there. And I told them as a part of my tenure, they had to let me build SASHA Center. And they said, okay, fine. So that was where we first had our first in-person groups. It was at Mary Grove. We put a sign out, put emails out. We told girlfriends, everybody, nobody came. We said, we'll do it again. We did it again. 7 people called. The 7 people that called said, I know somebody who needs to be in your group.
Right.
So that taught us a lesson right away. Okay, friend, then that means we got a Harriet Tubmanist. That means you got to bring her. Now, Black women, they will integrate, they will see that very differently than what white supremacist culture has taught us in school about freedom and choice and confidentiality and all those things.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, we would have to check. Did you come here on your free will? And someone was like, no, I didn't. It would be like, okay, so do you really want to be here? Because you don't have to be here. And girl, you can't just drag her in here like that. What's wrong with you? So for real. No, we have to hear you tell me this. So basically, what we found out though, we said we're gonna make the groups for supporters and their survivors and the experiencers and their people who love them, meaning and people who care about them too. So now people can bring their therapists, they can bring their friends, their mamas, their sisters, their cousins, as long as they fit the criteria, Black and 16 of age or older, they can come. And we don't even ask them how they identify. We don't even ask them to tell their stories. And what happens every time is when we give them a working definition of what rape is, the person call themselves helping somebody is like, if that's how you define it, I'm supposed to be here anyway.
Right. Right.
If that's how you describing it, I'm supposed to be here anyway. And so we don't have a working definition, but we're working on that. We're trying. And so thank you for asking that.
I would like to go in another direction.
Okay.
Because you are someone who brought this to my attention years ago. Well, look what she wearing. Right? Well, she was in the lobby anyway, right?
Yeah.
You just talk about that from a sense of one, what is it, why we do it, and why it's so dangerous.
Yeah, I like the way you frame that. So when crimes happen to people in general, people are quick to victim blame about any crime in particular. But let's talk about rape. There's a whole lot of issues, especially specific to Black women and girls, around victim blaming. Victim blaming starts when we start developing. We can't even develop in Black families without being called something. Fast, doing too much, sit down. You that must be happening because you letting somebody feel on your booty. Y'all done heard it all.
Right.
And so when something terrible happens, unfortunately, people will jump quick to try to identify those things that they think will make them feel safer. It's a false sense of safety when someone else victim blames. So you were wearing that, I would never wear that. You were in the lobby at 2 a.m. Oh, I would never be at the lobby at 2 a.m. So I feel safe. I feel safe because I know that these things could not possibly happen to me because you were wearing that, you were smoking that, you were drinking that, it was after 2. It's almost like we don't have a right to say no under certain circumstances. And so victim blaming is about false sense of safety. Victim blaming is also about 2 more things. If I find the one thing that you did wrong, which is something that I would never do, then that means I don't have to help you. Because you shouldn't have been doing that. And it's all around sex and body politics. It's all around, trying to hold Black women particularly to a standard that we're supposed to be responsible for our own safety, and we're not asking the questions. The right question is placing blame where it belongs, which is on people who choose to perpetrate, people who want to cause harm, people who want to have power and control over other people. And so that's a real big piece. And I'm glad you brought that up because it can happen easily, and it happens in places where people don't even recognize that they're doing it. And really what they're doing, and I always try to teach people this all the time, listen, when you start trying to figure out what she did wrong or he did wrong, that's you trying to feel safer, and that's you trying to come up with a reason not to have to deal with this, because talking about sex and talking about sexual assault and talking about anything related to Black women's bodies is taboo in the Black family.
100%, right? And you talked about white supremacy values, talked about socialization. All of that is so critical it plays into the reason why we internalized racial oppression shows up inside of our own communities, right? And we evaluate I literally should have permission to walk down the street as naked as I want to
Absolutely.
and be safe, right?
Right.
What we're doing to each other inside of our cultures, internalized racial oppression, as we continue to take on the behaviors of our oppressors and hold each other to a standard that puts us at risk, right? Like, and we're not having the conversation with each other in a way that honors who I am as a Black woman, that gives me permission to walk through this world the way that I should be able to walk without being judged, blamed, or shamed, right? Like, it's just not happening. And so one of the things that you brought up as we were preparing to go live is really trying to, what's the engagement piece of this conversation with other Black women? What's the engagement and understanding that we are now talking about a national health crisis? Put voice to that to really help us understand what it is that we are dealing with, what it is that we're facing with as we begin, because we're already at the bottom of the hour, as we begin to talk about strategies for paying attention, strategies for bringing other folks into the room, and what SASHA Center is doing and providing to women, whether they're experiencers or whether they're support to folks who have experienced sexual assault.
That was a lot and good.
Right.
And I'm gonna take this one bite at a time, because what you said and how you framed the question will allow me to talk about several things. The first thing I want to begin with is that what we're not talking about in community is the impact of slavery on our families. So I think about Dr. Joy DeGruy and her work, post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Gives me chills. Love.
She's advised us. We've been to some of her lectures, even out of town, myself and my co-director, to hear her powerful work. She's a DSW social worker, and she talks about these things. Her framing about post-traumatic slave syndrome is literally rooted in understanding how Black men show up. We benefit from it as Black women because what she's offered is an analytical tool for looking at how we show up in community. But there's another doctor I want to tell y'all about. Her name is Dr. Jennifer Gomez, and she has a new book coming out called Cultural Betrayal Trauma Theory. Cultural Betrayal Trauma. And what we talk about, which is rooted in the work that I'm doing, is a lot of times when women come to our groups and they start cracking jokes on folks and playing the dozens and all that kind of stuff, they're usually doing it to people in their family who have silenced them, not the actual person who committed the crime against them. Because the additional crime is to silence a Black woman and to tell her that didn't happen, or to expect her to take it to her grave, or what goes on in his house.
Right. All of those, right? Run it. All of that. All of that.
And this is a public health issue because, and if you look, I really want to send y'all to UGMA, and it's called UGMA, I think it's UGMA National Organization. They did a study and they found out for every 15 Black women that are raped in this country, only one goes to the police. There's a reason for that. Our communities are over-policed. Our families tell us that we can't call the police. We got to sit down and break bread with uncle or auntie so-and-so, knowing that they caused us harm and expected not to say anything. And so we have to begin our conversations with dispelling myths and facts about Black folk, and understanding that when we first got here to this country, our bodies wasn't ours to navigate. We didn't have a no to give, because our bodies was about making more slaves. Our bodies was about something different. And I don't care what nobody say, we know as a fact, and we know this because of the No documentary, there was no lynchings of any man, Black or white, in this country for the said rape of a Black woman.
Right.
And so we got to climb back from that. If we are not valued as humans, and if we were treated as chattel, and if we were expected to not say anything, and then we are trained to continue not to use the systems that oppress us, then where does that leave us? And so, and then on top of that, okay, we have this way of being in the world. Like, I'm not saying that we don't need our spirituality, we don't need our religion, we don't need that. But that has done a number on us too. Like a lot of people have experienced church hurt. A lot of people have experienced sexual assault within the church, and we're not talking about it. And I remember one time I met this pastor, and Kalimah's doing this great work. Talk to her. She need to come to our church to have a conversation. And I said, yeah, this is a sexual assault agency, sexual assault. Yeah, that domestic violence is something else, ain't it? I said, I ain't what I said. And we have to be able to talk about these things in the way that we talk about them. And we haven't created enough spaces for that to happen. I did a training not too long ago with some legal aid folks that work. They're in legal aid, and their job is to work specifically with domestic violence and sexual assault victims. And I started out with the conversation of, do y'all know that we have a Black organization ran by Black women, created by Black people in the city of Detroit to assist Black women who've experienced rape? Well, yeah, we know because you're here. And I'm like, did you know that other Black women do not make referrals to our program as much as I think they should and need to? There's like one clutching their pearls. Why wouldn't that happen? It's a room full of Black women. I said, well, when was the last time you did? Oops. With love, you can throw something at me if you need to, but when was the last time you did it? And what stops you? What keeps you from providing a resource, right? I've had Black women tell me, oh, I've never heard of the SASHA Center with that whole, oh, I've never heard of that. I'm like, that's not a flex bag. We've been around for 12 years. And I admit we got some work to do on our end to make sure people know about us, right? So I thank you all for allowing us to have this conversation with you today. We got to make sure people know. But once you know, please don't call the agency talking about, I got this Asian Latina woman. And I'm not saying we don't service them people. They can come, everybody can come, but we're gonna center the voices of Black women. Right. What that means, sometimes we might be in Zoom, you'll see a girl with headphones on, with her laptop turned the other way so the person in the room can't see, but we see she brave. And she's showing up. And then that's another thing, talking about white supremacy culture. They wanna count everything. Well, the person that came on that day, they didn't come back again until 10 weeks later, because that's when she needed to count. Right. Counting the wrong things. And we need to count the fact that Black women are showing up. Not only that, we need to count that Black women are even willing to register. We need to count that Black women are even willing to call. Because what that means is they've had to put some stuff aside to put themselves first.
Powerful. So how do we begin to engage Black women in asking for, seeking for, finding their voices when we've been socialized in every way, at every level, to stay silent? And I'm hoping that this conversation begins us to transition us into this conversation about no.
Yeah, well, silence breaking is your right, Black women. You have every right to own and tell your narrative. And what needs to happen is we need to know how to respond to that. And because we don't know how to respond to that, Black women keep things to themselves. We are each other's keepers. And if we know that someone's in pain or suffering in isolation, we also know, and there's been lots of research about how we heal better in groups. That's why we don't do individual therapy at SASHA Center. We only do support groups. We need to begin to start having conversations with our young people much earlier than we have about their body parts. It is not a pocketbook, a hoo-ha, a dang-a-lang. It ain't none of that. Use the proper names for body parts. It increases the safety of your children. Because when there's a groomer around and they see that baby know all the right parts and the names of those parts, they know that that baby can tell. Right. But then also as grown Black women, know your parts and know how they work. You are a sexual being. And sex should not always be tied to trauma. As Black women, we deserve to enjoy the bodies that we have. And don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. And we need to believe women when they do break silence. I believe.
Kalimah, there's nothing more painful than you telling your story to a friend and the response is, girl, what did you do?
Yep. Victim blaming.
Right.
And I need to find out what you did so I can feel safer.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
It's very heartbreaking.
In a vulnerable moment.
So it starts with being educated on this level. When somebody loves you enough to tell you that they've been sexually assaulted, I don't care if it was yesterday or 20 years ago, I believe you, it's not your fault, and how can I help? And then after you say, how can I help? You sit and you listen and you help in the way that that person needs help. You don't get to ride down on nobody. You don't get to call the police. You don't get to post it on Facebook asking for help from other people. You don't get to do none of that. Just listen and wait. And if she says she needs a glass of water, get her that. Or he, or whoever it is. If they say they want you to go with them to the police department, then do that. I think that when women come to our groups, it is super helpful to those who are using the systems and those who are not. And when they're together, sometimes you just need to get a little bit more strength so you can show up. And when it's time for you to make that police report and you got somebody asking you to tell the story for the third time, you can advocate for yourself and say, the information is already there. I am not in a position, nor do I want to repeat what happened to me over and over again, because it feels like I'm being raped over and over again. So if you don't have that information, I suggest you find it somewhere, because I'm not telling you the story again. Mm-hmm. You get it that first time and then we done. But a lot of times as women, we are navigating these spaces and we don't know what our rights are, what we can ask for, what the things we can do or say. And I believe that if people are taxpayers and people making money, you know, working for these public entities, that they should be about the business. And there are programs, and we've trained MCOs and all kinds of folks in terms of how to respond to Black women who've been sexually assaulted. And we created a model. It's called the Black Women's Triangulation of Rape. And that model went viral the year that Surviving R. Kelly came out, because Dream Hampton tweeted it and it got retweeted 8,000 times. And we talk about what barriers get in the way and make it difficult for Black women to get services. But one of the things that I'm super excited about is that the SASHA Center is still here and that we're still doing the work. And there are more Black women coming because we found more funding. So we got 1124 is coming along to focus on Black women and girls. There is Supreme Transitions. They're both focusing on Black women and girls now. And they treat me like, I love it because they treat me like I'm the queen bee, like, oh, you the one. So we're going to get all this information. Hey, whatever I have, I give it, because I think that there are all kinds of ways that we can engage Black women. And we need to really get the message out there that Black women are not all the same. And we need to be working on behalf of trans Black women. We need to be working
Where
on—
I was going, Kalimah, that's right. Like, so that's the next level of this conversation. And again, I know we won't have time to go there. But I'm excited to hear you say that SASHA Center is a place, right? Because one of the things I talk about in doing equity work is, please do not attempt to play the oppression Olympics with a Black person.
Don't.
Right? Like, we got gold and didn't ask for it. You cannot talk about, right? Like, I understand intersectionality, absolutely. But again, the most unprotected in this country is the Black woman. And so whatever marginalization you can bring, I can level you up one by putting the word Black in front of it. So when we start talking about the trans community, right? There is no person that is more endangered, more at risk than the Black trans woman.
Absolutely.
And I'm so glad that you lifted that up in this conversation.
Absolutely. And so I will tell you that at the SASHA Center, we're not an LGBTQI organization. We have never been that. But we don't care who you are or how you got there. If you were sexually assaulted, we're going to find a space for you. And if we can't do it, we will partner with the Ruth Ellis Center. I have Ruth Ellis's ashes. She was my friend. I have her ashes. She was my friend. And I remember how she used to talk about protecting the LGBTQI youth. And I remember how passionate she was about those things. And so back to the center though, however you identify, it's unfortunate that we have groups for women and we have groups for men. When we create groups, right? When we created the group for Black women, they weren't coming. And we say we Black women. It ain't enough to just be a Black woman running a Black agency. The Black women ain't coming. So we got to figure out how to keep engaging. And it's the same lesson with other markers of difference in other communities. And it would be ideal if we had trans leadership doing that. And we're still trying to massage that relationship and being intentional about it. And we have trans participants that come to group. And the bottom line is, we don't care if you're here, we're going to work it out. Now, there's this one group in particular. It seemed like everybody who identify other than the binaries are in that group, but we don't name it that.
Right.
They're just showing up and we're not going to change it. And we want them to show up. And why? Because we have a leader, a facilitator, an amazing Black woman poet who ask at the beginning of every session, how are you identifying? Who are you? What are your pronouns that you use? She asked, and I think the word got out that she asked, so they start showing up over there. And we love it. And we love it. And trans women have been helping us organize since day one. Our first Mute R. Kelly, our first Take Back the Night Detroit, we had trans women on those boards helping us develop and do that work. So we want to continue to do that and continue to uplift that. And we can't do that in the Black community until we engage in another phrase I want to give you all from Darnell Moore. Darnell Moore is a writer, creator, content person. He wrote an article called Black Radical Love. And Black Radical Love looks like we got to love all of us. And we have to recognize the gifts that we bring in all of it. And we have to recognize that Black women are not monolithic at all. We got Black women who are Christians. We got a spirit group that we run at least twice a year. Last year, it was all about crystals, candles, Florida water, tarot cards, readings, and everything else. And this year, it's all about Bible scriptures, and we about to have a gospel choir. So and we have to be able to be that flexible to show up for Black women.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question.
So, right, like it opens the door to so much more. And I circle back to the top of my question to Crystal, when is she coming back, right? So, right, like we've got 14 minutes and I'm paying attention to, we want folks to know how they can get a hold of you.
Sure.
We also, again, want to talk about Mute R. Kelly. We also want to talk about, which for me, this part I'm going to ask you to lean into because women struggle with saying no.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We've never been given permission to say no as a full sentence with a period.
Period.
Right? A comma behind it. We put a no but behind it, like all of those things.
Yes.
So we don't have a lot of time left. When I think about a tool to empower Black women, talk about the no, Kalimah.
All right, good. I'm glad you asked that, and I will make a reference. So first of all, we have this thing called Soul Care Sundays, and it's every second Tuesday of the month. So we will miss this, like, because we'll be at the same time, right? But last month, we did the power of no. And it's on Facebook. You can go right to our SASHA Center Facebook page. It's the first video you'll see because that's the last thing we did. And it's called The Power of No. And it was led by our program manager, Larminder A. Davis, and myself. And we had one of our younger facilitators. We'd love to have the young ones on there because they get us together about no and what that means. And generationally, we had a conversation about the power of no and saying no. Ayana Yet. And so the three of us had a conversation just about the power of no. And it is one sentence. And you do have a right to use it. And one of the things that I could say is that sometimes people don't believe your no. They ignore your no. And then once you say no, it's the I got to deal with it. It's like the no with the excuse or the no with the explanation or the no with the, we always feel like we've got to do that because family members, friends, and loved ones and partners and all that expect for us to be Teflon. They expect for us to be able to show up. They expect for, oh, what do you mean? No, what do you mean? You don't have the option to say no to me because I need you and because I need you to be all these things. And then we keep putting that Superwoman cape on too. And we keep wearing it and we keep on thinking, and that's probably one of the reasons why Black women have a hard time, not all of them, have a hard time referring other Black women to our program because they took their Superwoman cape off and said, see, I was raped and I'm good and I'm still working here. Bam, you take that. You don't need no help. Just go ahead on about yourself. No. And see, the idea here about no is it is an active practice. It is a spiritual practice. When you say no, you are saying yes to yourself. When you say no, you are saying yes to prioritizing what your needs are. When you say no, you are communicating to people how they are supposed to treat you. When you say no, you are setting, i.e., a boundary. And a boundary is a limit that you can set between yourself, a person, place, a thing, and nobody should have to stop you from doing that. And sometimes your no is not just a radical no. Your no is because it's for your health. It's for your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health. We have to be able to start practicing to say no. And sometimes you have to start with the little stuff. And then other times you have to like try the big stuff. And really, it's how do you respond to people when they're responding to your no? And it is setting your boundaries, staying grounded and footed in what's important and understanding and knowing what your values are and communicating your values to others.
I so love that saying no should not have to be radical.
No.
It shouldn't have to be radical.
It should not
It
have to
should
be.
be revolutionary. I love that. So, Kalimah, with all the fear and uncertainty, I'm coming to SASHA Center. What can I expect?
So when you come to SASHA Center, it really is a opportunity for you to engage however you want to. Because of the pandemic, we had to get really smart technology-wise, and we have virtual support groups, we have some support groups in person. But if you're just not ready, you just want to see what we're about, you can go to Facebook, you can go to Instagram, and you can go to Twitter, and you can just see all the things that we post about and talk about. But primarily, when you interact with the SASHA Center, the first thing that I tell everybody to do is go to our website, go to the registration button, and then you can see all of the sessions that we're having right now. The one session that they'll be told about when they call is the one that we have every Tuesday. It's every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. It's led by Larminder A. Davis, and other facilitators join her. And it's every time. And all we do is we let them know that when you join the group, we're not going to ask you to disclose. We're not going to ask you who caused you harm, when it happened. We're not going to ask any of those things. We focus on providing you with the tools that you need to integrate this experience. The next thing we say is that you do know that you're not going to ever forget what happened to you. It's going to stay with you forever. But trying to forget is the part that we want to pay attention to, because when you're trying to forget, you get involved in risky behaviors, and those risky behaviors do not serve you. So when they go to the registration link, they click which one they want to, you register, and then you show up. And when you show up in the space, we do ask that you have your cameras on. We ask that you have headsets on if you're in a room with other people, and that you situate yourself so you're by yourself. So people join us from their cell phones and their cars, in their bedrooms with their doors closed, in their offices, and that's fine, as long as no one else can hear. And then we start our support group, and our support group starts with an opening affirmation and a closing one, and they're all the same everywhere. And then we ask them to, just participate as they feel comfortable. Sometimes people will come in with their cameras on, and they don't know what to expect. And when they see and they learn that, we're not trying to gather their stories so we can tell them it's their fault. Because Black folks, we have interfaced so much with so many different systems and families that blame us for what happens. We don't think that this is any different, really. But when they find out it is, and that we're not going to blame you, that we do believe you, and that you show up how you need to show up, and that we're going to concentrate on things like, how do you identify the things that bring you joy? How do you engage in those things? The difference between a risky behavior and a safe behavior. How do you create safety in your own space? What other resources do you need? And so we also provide specific assistance, gift cards. We help people pay their bills. We give people an opportunity to learn more about sexual assault. They can get active and be a part of our activism arm, our prevention and education arm. Some survivors have gone on and have become facilitators for us, and we pay everybody the same. We don't care what kind of degree you got, because we know that this is a heavy lift, and that this work requires a heart, but it also requires training, and it also requires a keen interest in Black women in particular. And we believe in Black women leadership. And so we want to provide survivors with the opportunity to be leaders, and to come up with their own sessions, and to come up with their own ideas about how they want to engage other Black women. Another thing I will say is that Black women think that sharing their rape story is going to help somebody. Not all the time. If sharing your story is what you need to do, then come to group. But we teach you how to hear stories too.
So, seat at the table. Thank you for creating a table for Black women, by Black women, that allows us to consider what healing might look like. Did I not tell you, Facebook listeners, this was a dope, amazing soul. Us tonight. We scratched all of the surfaces, not even all of them. We scratched so many of the surfaces, and we're subject to go a couple minutes over for a real intentional reason tonight. One, it is important because you had a role in voice. We need to hear about Mute R. Kelly. And then we also know that you have the gift of the spoken word, and we need to hear from you on that platform as well. I promise you, Facebook, if you stay on, you will continue to be blessed. So first, we're going to ask you to share with us, for those who may not know about Mute R. Kelly, and then what role you played.
Sure, and we'll make that quick because we don't want to give him too much platform. I will say this, that the Mute R. Kelly campaign started by two women in Atlanta, Kenyette Tish Barnes and Oreneke. And when they both started muting R. Kelly, what they did is start following where he was having concerts. And they reached out to Detroit and they said, listen, R. Kelly coming there and we are trying to stop him from coming anywhere, going anywhere. And we want to know if you'll be willing to join us. I said, absolutely. And so I got Nicole Denson and I got together and we decided that we were going to make plans all around muting R. Kelly here in Detroit. And when you know, we Detroit, we do everything on another level all the time. And when Kenyette and Oreneke saw how we organized and that big physical presence we had in front of LCA and the ways that we achieved some things, they were mind blown. They could not believe it. And it wasn't until after we did the Mute R. Kelly in Detroit that things started turning towards making sure that we held him accountable for the things that he had done in the past and what he had been currently doing. One of the things that I will say is that we got the city council to sign a, what is it called? They signed what do you call it? Mm-hmm. It's come with the word. Anyway, they signed something that said R. Kelly could never come back to Detroit and perform ever again. And so that was one thing that we were able to do that other cities were not able to do. And we had all kinds of people out there. We had Black men and white people and everybody saying we have to hold this man accountable for his behavior. And at the end of the day, we also faced a lot of people who wanted to protect him. You know, those conversations at the barbecue. I still got people I know and love that's like, oh, we love his music. Okay, great. He was a great musician, but he was a horrible human being. And so at some point, we got to start holding people accountable. And everything that happens in our own families on these smaller levels about protecting uncles and protecting abusers. And I keep saying uncles, all uncles ain't bad, but, you know, protecting the perpetrator in the household is the same exact dynamics that came up when folks was trying to protect R. Kelly. And we was like, look, this is what you do in your household and shame on you. And I hope there's no one in your family holding on to something because of how you're acting right now, because they're watching how you're responding to a person who caused harm, and that we needed to really unpack that. So with the Mute R. Kelly campaign, I will say that it was Dream Hampton and her documentary, Surviving R. Kelly, that was on the Lifetime channel, that is now on Netflix, really also helped move the needle in terms of holding him accountable. And so that's all I have to say about R. Kelly. That's it.
More than enough. And right, like what's underlining the need to have that conversation is necessary for us to have paid attention to it, even for that brief moment.
We need to stop silencing Black women and girls and let them have their stories and let them share what they need to share when they need to share it. And we need to start uplifting good men and boys and having conversations socially, like you talked about the equity and inclusion, diversity. We haven't begun to unpack the whole fluidity and meaning of gender. And gender sometimes socializes us into believing or not believing somebody when they've experienced some kind of sexual trauma. And we have to do that as well. And what else we gonna talk about? You said some poetry, huh?
Yes.
Well, I was gonna read this one poem, but I really wanna leave us on a high note. And I have not practiced this piece in a long time, but I'm gonna try my best to do it now. It's my hope that it's inspirational. And then also I wanna make a promise. I will go back in and watch this video on Facebook, and I will drop every resource that I mentioned in this interview. Because if you hear something that has been triggering or hurtful or harmful to you and you need help, please know that the help is available to you at the SASHA Center. Our phone number is 1-888-865-7055. But I'll put all of that, everything that I've mentioned, I'll put it in our conversation on the chat so people will have access to it. Yes, of course. And then this poem that I'm going to read, I actually shared it in a new documentary that's coming out called Undeterred, but it's still in its editing phase right now. But it's my poem. I own it, so I can say it when I want to. And I hope I don't lose it. Sometimes I have to just give it up. When I witness a sister who can navigate the most difficult of systems in order to feed her children. Or when I see her at a bus stop in the middle of the night, leaving one job just to go home to another job of cooking, washing, cleaning, dusting, fussing over some things that we would call a small thing, meaning she has a meaning and a reason to wake up with the sun and lay down with the moon and move and follow the sky until it fills with bright stars, ignoring the gray, because the possibility of rain means she has to form her back into an umbrella to protect her little ones from getting wet. My, oh my, how we women with no children seem to quickly forget how our mothers nurtured us into womanhood. And I saw her stripping brown paper bag and twisting them into rollers for our curls on picture day. And I saw her rubbing our elbows and our ankles with Crisco so we could look like brand new. And I saw her on one leg with one egg to steal, borrow, and or beg. I saw her once fit a square-shaped problem into a rounded peg, looking for a solution. Evolution has been good to her. Superwoman, she'd be the answer for the weary, tackling the world with a spatula and a frying pan, and degrees come in the form of a bachelor's or a master's plan. But sometimes a woman is in need of her Bible, and I dare you to try to pry it from her hands, or she might be the chanting kind. I said she might be the chanting kind, chanting kind, chanting kind. Light a match, burn a candle kind, or she might be handy with the legless candy, a fan and some ashe, or she might light up a cigarette because blunts are for stunts and all she knows how to get it done. She will name her kids after kings or queens, or defy the tongues of some folks and name her offspring Tayshawn, Rashe, Cadillac, or Ashe, I don't know. But what we need to do is heed the power of that sister anyway. As she shines when the world wants her to fade, she never whines when it's her time to cascade. And to descend upon her crown, to receive her own, she on her own, and she grown and she prone to have your back because she down like that. And when we lack the skills to build to be productive, that sister shows up seductive enough and never too much, and luck ain't got nothing to do with it. She be a Black woman and blessed. A Black woman at her best. She won't stop to rest and she wears her armor on her chest. So don't worry, because the work is already done. The fight is already won. She be the almighty deliverer of our daughters and our sons. And sometimes, y'all, sometimes for a Black woman, for a sister, for your mama, your auntie, your grandmama, your cousin, you got to just RESPECT, give it up. Crystal, thank you.
So very powerful.
I thank the Lord. I lost it a couple times, but I got it, picked it back up. I picked up what I was putting down. Thank you.
Thank
you, Michele.
We hold it so close. The gift of who you are has changed somebody's life, and we cannot find the words to fully thank you for owning your amazing in the way that you do, for showing up despite all the odds against every Black woman, and providing us a space for healing, providing us a space to move through and to find the value of who we are. Kalimah, you are beyond.
Yeah.
I love y'all. Thank you so much. I receive it, I accept it, I ain't tired. We got work to do.
No words. I think I would love to dedicate that poem that you just read to every Black woman that's been on this show from its inception, because this is Amazing Women Speak. This is what it is about. This is what we are supposed to be doing. I celebrate you, Kalimah, all the time.
Yes, you do. I love you.
And we didn't even get to talk about you as Lock Mama. Like, we just absolutely didn't even have a chance to talk about that. So you do have to come back. So we
I'm coming back.
Right. So we can talk about,
because we want to talk about happy and joy, and we want to. I believe Black women deserve joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really can't press that enough. And at the SASHA Center, we believe in harnessing that joy. We have fun. We have fun. We take them on culture trips. We listen to music. We dance. We hula hoop. We play jacks. We color. We do. And we don't apologize for that.
You are so dynamic, not just with the work that you do in SASHA Center, but just as an individual. And so for those that don't know, Kalimah is my Lock Mama. She does my hair. And I am, if I'm sitting there and the doorbell rings, I'm like, who is that? Because my time.
I be doing the same. I do the same thing. And
Oh,
what's
Lord,
so
are you kidding me right
and
now?
Crystal, we've been together for so long, and you
Oh
pour
my
into me
God.
just as much. And I know when you pouring into me, it's because Michele has poured into you.
Are you kidding me?
Oh, do you
Listen,
think I don't know?
did you do you
She
hear
your accountability partner. She your rest partner. She your no partner.
she all of
We
that.
all
She is
got to have
all of that. I thank you. I celebrate you. I thank you. I appreciate you, not only for being my lock mama, but for being my friend for these past 20 something years at this point, which is absolutely crazy and phenomenal. I'm in awe of you always, and I lift you up always because God is not done with you, my child. God is not done with you. You got a mighty work.
Amen. Amen.
And I love the fact that you do it unapologetically, because I've been privy to some conversations and I get to hear what you do across this nation. And
Yes,
it's
you
a
do.
beautiful thing. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So I definitely celebrate you. I thank you. We will have to figure out when we can have you back.
Please
I
do.
told you, listeners, that this would be the fastest hour, that we would not be able to get through everything. But I'm so glad we had the opportunity. I don't even know what else to say. We won't be here for the next 2 weeks. Next week, my daughter graduates from FAMU.
All
We
righty.
will be in Tallahassee.
Yeah.
I'm super excited about that. And congratulations to all of the graduates. That it's graduation season, and
It
I
is.
have
They
on my
everywhere.
timeline. It has been a wonderful thing. So congratulations to that. The following week is Mother's Day, so we won't be doing a show on Mother's Day either.
That's right.
But bravo and a job well done. We'll see you back, everyone, on the 21st, where the topic will be, and I know Michele can't wait on this topic, that's your foot on the brake. So that's going to be really, really good. Thank you so much. I am Crystal Gunn. I am a Black woman, and I own my amazing. Michele?
Yes, as always, cannot end this show, Crystal, without thanking you for your obedience to the call that God put on your life to create a platform where Black women get to simply be, to get to sit in the idea that at birth, their amazing was established. And each week we invite our listeners in and we invite guests in to share their stories in ways that will empower. You touch women's lives who have yet to be in your physical space. And for that, I am forever grateful and will say yes every single time. My name is Michele Harper. I am a Black woman, and I own, without apology, my amazing Kalimah.
Thank you both so much. The only thing I can say is amen, ashe, boom shakalaka, don't stop, get it, get it. My name is Kalimah Johnson. I am a Black woman and I own my amazing.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Good night, everybody. We will see you back on May 21st. Have a good night.
Bye for now.
Goodbye.